This podcast sometimes uses strong language, and it may cover topics that require viewer discretion. Also, it's a podcast. It's not a primary source of information. If you'd like to follow along visually with the show, or read any of the papers we talk about yourself, you can find all of those links and more at ridiculousresearchreview.com. This scientist's find, you guessed it once again comes from The Independent. Which really, like, somebody should do something about the bunk science The Independent is posting as news articles, but that someone's not me, other than, deriding them here. This one, however, scientists surprised to find abundance of alligators in city's sewer system.
No.
And I know what you're thinking.
Wait. That it's wrong?
It's the classic urban legend. Like, what are you talking
Exactly. You're
about?
thinking this is the world's oldest urban legend. This can't possibly be true. However, this is the rare case where this news article is actually correct.
No way.
This is from a study from the University of Florida led by a man named Alan Ivory. And it was a study of sewer systems.
That's a fake name, by the way. Alan Ivory, the finding crocodiles in the sewer,
alligators specifically, because the study was done in the state of Florida, and they found a total of 35 different species of vertebrates living in the sewer systems, including alligators and turtles and other reptiles. And what they mostly found is that they are actually using the sewer systems and the stormwater systems to move from pond to pond in ways that allowed them to avoid crossing streets. The journal, the actual journal that the study was published in was the Urban Naturalist, if you are interested in finding the actual study research.
Totally unrelated, I just learned that the University of Florida newspaper is called the Independent Florida Alligator.
Of course it is.
Because I was trying to search for this story.
So you searched Independent Florida Alligators and you got the school newspaper. That is hysterical.
Yeah. I don't know. The first thing, because it's a newspaper in Florida, woman arrested after armed standoff with SWAT unit, local police at Walmart. Florida woman.
I feel like we're losing the thread.
Sorry.
I feel like that one doesn't belong.
We really can't go down the Florida man rabbit hole right now.
Okay, well, we'll take it from there, I guess.
Welcome to the Ridiculous Research Review. I'm Dr. James Lynch, PhD, PE, which I say under duress because they won't let me just be a person.
Correct.
This guy, I do all the work to bring a paper, and he jumps the gun.
So good.
He introduces the podcast anyway.
He introduces himself and does it out of order this time. You just can't win, James.
I'll take my second billing. I'm Patrick Brennan. I am a professor of technical theater, a technical director, and a game designer.
And I am Edie Churchill. I am a nonprofit administrator, finance and operations. I also do some poetry and theater and other things. I'm just here. I'm hanging out.
Cool.
Dude, the great part about me being on this show is that I do no work. I just show up and I get to say things.
I listen, we're cutting that out because you're bringing a paper.
True.
I'm not letting that line stay
Fair.
in. I control the edit. I can make you fuckers say whatever I want. Anyway, so I am presenting today's paper, and this one is a little bit interesting from a starting point because I think it is the farthest back of any of the research papers that we have looked at so far. So I'm going to take us all the way back to 1997. Put yourselves in that headspace. All of us are small children.
I think I'm really into Aladdin.
Yeah.
I think that's around that time.
1997?
Tamagotchi is the hot new toy on the market. concern for the Y2K bug is growing sort of in public consciousness right now, like some of the things that are going on right now. And The Lion King has just opened on Broadway.
Oh, there you go.
You said 97, right?
1997.
Oh, Anastasia came out in 97. That's that's the big one.
But The Lion King on Broadway, that's actually where I'd like to keep us, because that's right, folks, I'm taking us Big City Lights, I'm taking us to Broadway on this episode.
Oh.
That's where we're going to hang out.
Hey, that's like your area of expertise.
It's like my area of expertise. It's like I've brought something relevant to my field of
Weird.
What? Incredible.
study. I know. So, we're going to start with the explanation of this one by sort of walking through the practical part of the research of what we actually did, and then we're going to take a step back and we're going to sort of look at the whole project as a whole, basically.
Nice.
And where we start is a little interesting because everybody in this study is anonymous, right? So I don't know
Interesting.
who the individual participants were. But what I can tell you is that all of them were Broadway actors, specifically Broadway actors in musicals, right? So if you would like to imagine, as we describe this scene, it is quite possible that we are looking at folks like Idina Menzel, Taye Diggs, Anthony Rapp, all of whom are on Broadway at this time, right? Now, there are several hundred Broadway actors, and this study, as we're going to see, is only going to cover about 97 of them. But, like, there's very far from a non-zero chance that one of these, like, big-name folks that you know is actually in this study, okay? So what are we doing? Each of our 95 Broadway actors, over the course of a year, are checking in 16 times, sometimes on Wednesdays, sometimes on Saturdays, and they're being put through a series of tests, all right? So the first of these tests, they are set up in front of just a microphone. A recording of their voice is made, where they are essentially just making the E noise, so E kind of a thing. They make that at a high pitch, sort of like a normal pitch, and a low pitch. And that sound that they make is recorded, and it is processed through a computer, which analyzes it for 4 things. The computer is looking at it for jitter, shimmer, fundamental frequency, and noise to harmonic ratio. Now, vocal studies are, and vocal work is not my area of specialties. So I am not certain what these things are, and I don't think what they specifically are in terms of vocal work matters. Just know that a computer is analyzing, like, the consistency of these actors over time's vocal work, basically. All right? Once the sound recording is done, each actor is then asked to recite the Rainbow Passage. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to play you two a video of it right now.
So once a week they're having these actors read this in front of a microphone.
Yes, I'm going to recite this again, but what I want you two to know about the Rainbow Passage, what makes this thing special if you have not heard about this, is that it's sort of like the Quick Brown Fox. You know how the Quick Brown Fox has every...
Jumps over the lazy dog, yeah.
Has every letter in the English language, so it's great for testing, like, keyboards and things like that. The Rainbow Passage, to my understanding, contains all or almost all of the various phonetics and sounds in the English language, right? Okay. So the Rainbow Passage, for those that can't watch the video, is when the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act like a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. These take the shape of a long round arch with its path high above and its 2 ends apparently beyond the horizon. There is, according to legend, a boiling pot of gold at one end. People look, but no one ever finds it. When a man looks for something beyond reach, his friends say he is looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Okay? So that is the second part of their medical evaluation, is to recite the Rainbow Passage.
So here's one thing I just want to point out is we started this episode with Pat telling us he can make us say anything he wants it to because he controls the edit. So I will not be reading the Rainbow Passage for Patrick's evil machinations. Nice try, Patrick.
But you're saying that because you have, like, every phoneme in the English language in this passage, you could do that with, like, a couple of repetitions of this.
No. So for a vocal bank like that, you would need a lot more. The Rainbow Passage, though, is a really good evaluator and practice piece. So, like, that video actually I linked to, That video is not from this study. That's actually from an orthodontist, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
That orthodontist is showing that, like, after adjusting teeth, maybe it fixed a lisp or something. I haven't looked too much into that. I just needed an example.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But it's used by lots of speech pathologists and things like that, and vocal coaches, obviously, because speaking with accents, obviously, is important to Broadway actors.
Yeah, totally.
And then we come to the third part of this examination that all of our Broadway actors are going through, which is that each of them get a spirometer test, and they get a video endoscopy.
Okay.
I don't know what either of those things are, but I do know that this is called a Cosmed Pony spirometer,
Let me help you out
which
here.
I don't know what that is, but I like it.
I believe it is the brand. They called it out specifically, and so I was able to look up specifically what these devices, I believe, looked like for this study. Like I said, this part of the study there's not like a lot of photographs or documentation because, again, we are working with some high-profile people, and even if we weren't, we are working with people in a medical study, and we don't want to just, like, take photos of them having medical work done and blast it all over the place, basically.
No fair.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So a spirometer measures, like, lung capacity and, like, air output.
Can I describe what it looks like from my end?
Yeah, please.
Because it looks like one of those, like, old-fashioned calculators with the, like, spiral paper on the end of it that you would punch calculations into, with what appears to be a socket wrench strapped to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right.
With like an old school corded, like spiral corded plastic phone cable, the ones that would like stretch a long distance. Pretty honestly, good looking piece of equipment for like retro 90s.
Retro 90s.
We're super duper
feel.
in late 90s, and I was doing my best to make sure that I found photos of what I believe are like the pieces of equipment they were probably using for this.
Like, this would be a great piece of equipment for a kid playing doctor. Like, it looks like it's made by Mattel.
In 1997, it was a great piece of equipment for a doctor.
Correct.
Yeah, and so then the other thing that we have there is the fiber optic
Laryngoscope.
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 Larynx.
Yeah.
Larynx.
It's the scope for your larynx scope.
Larynxscope, yeah.
And knowing what I know about the larynx and knowing what I see in front of me, it appears that this is like a small handle that includes a long, very thin tube with an eyepiece to allow you to look down that tube and, I assume, shove it down someone's throat.
Close. I mean, yes.
Nose? Does it go down their nose?
So it goes. They anesthetize the nose. It goes into the nasal cavity, excuse me, and then it goes down their throat. And they're doing exactly that. They're looking down these actors' throats, basically. And then with this camera down their throat, they are again asked to make the E noise. They're asked to count to 10, and they are asked to sing a verse of the Star-Spangled Banner. Okay.
So far, this feels like a prank being played on these Broadway actors.
And that's
A little bit.
At this point, it all kind of feels like a prank.
Once a week, we're going to shove a thing down your nose and make you sing the national anthem. We promise it's for science.
Right. And so what the paper describes this as is that essentially we are looking at the aerodigestive tracts of our Broadway actors. That is how it is described in the paper.
Gonna need to tell me more about what aerodigestive means.
I mean, basically where the air and the food goes, right? Like we're looking down.
Oh, we're looking down. Okay.
Right.
There is not like some
sure.
specific thing of like, I don't know. My initial thought was like, oh, is this like some sort of disorders where you are swallowing air into your stomach in a way that's bad, or vice versa? Like, that was my first thought, but
not really. But you're touching a lot of points of this. So, how do we get there, and why are we doing this? So, this is a study that is sponsored by the Equity League Pension Health and Trust Fund.
wait a minute.
Yep. So, Edie, you know what that is. James, you probably don't know what that is. That is, we're now talking about Actors Equity. The Actors Equity Association is the big union on Broadway. They cover actors, but they also cover stage managers, right? And
The most ridiculous piece on this slide is that it says the AEA makes this a mandatory meeting, not participation for all Broadway musicals.
Yeah. Hold on. We'll get into that in a second. I've given myself some notes for me to kind of go through here. This study is performed by Jacqueline Moline, and it's performed by Anne Golden. These are both medical doctors. Anne Golden is an epidemiologist, and Jacqueline Moline is also an epidemiologist, but a practicing doctor as well. All right. And how this gets started is that basically the Actors Equity Association, because like I said, we are looking specifically at Broadway actors, which is a narrow subset of people, to say the least. Yes.
Can we zoom out a little bit? I want to make sure I fully understand what Actors Equity is, and like who's included, and who's maybe not, who's
so
not.
Actors Equity covers it's the stage union. Mostly it covers Broadway theatrical actors and Broadway stage managers, right?
Yes. And it is particularly performers and stage managers. There is a separate union for stage hands and technicians.
Like Manhattan, it's local 1, and it's a different local if you are in a different part of New York City. But so that's who Actors Equity is, and I promise we're going to delve more into them. We're going to learn a little bit more about them as we go. But for now, just know that it is the union that represents these folks that are being studied, and that the union is the one that puts this all in motion, basically.
This is a huge national union as well. This is a big national association union.
So Actors Equity funds this study. They kind of put this all into motion, and the way that they do this is they start by making a mandatory meeting for all Broadway musical casts. Now, that doesn't mandate participation in this study. It just means that they all have to come to the meeting about it. It is worth noting here, I want to pause for a second and note that this paper is 180 pages long.
So much.
It is a bunch. It was a lot for me to reduce to a reasonable format for this. I am helped by the fact that like a lot of it is a presentation of graphs that we just need small examples of. It is also very funny to me that a lot of this is specifically covering the logistics of trying to get actors to do paperwork. There are multiple pages on this.
Oh my God.
And I think that my assumption is that something very funny happened where stage managers met data scientists. And were put into collaboration for the first time, because stage managers are sort of like the paperwork gurus of the theater world, right? Like they quite literally run the show.
Administrative,
right?
Brilliant people.
Paperwork templates, for everything, kind of a thing. And so I am sure that these scientists were like, hey, we need this information, and they kind of got it in format. Or they again, the science teams were like, here is a format for the questionnaires we need you to fill out. And I'm sure the stage managers took that to heart, kind of a thing. But what they discovered is that getting the actors to do this paperwork and actually complete it, even when it was at a union mandated meeting, was pretty tough. So we're going to see that kind of crop up over and over as we kind of run through this. What that means is that the initial sample size at the first meeting, they get 439 actors to fill out the initial questionnaire at the meeting about this study. But by the time we get to the practical test, where they're actually doing that thing I described before, where we are checking vocal sounds and things like that, by then our trial is down to about 95 actors. Okay, so these questionnaires that I'm talking about. They divide this study into phases, basically. So phase 3 was that sort of medical study I talked about. Phase 1 was this meeting. A questionnaire is handed out to all of these Broadway actors. That's where we get our 439 first responses. And it's basically, you would recognize it as sort of a general medical survey. It asks a lot about just medical history in both you and your family, right? It also asks about things like perceived stress levels at work and at home. And it asks about the various physical tasks that each of the performers does during the show. So whether or not they dance, they sing, they just have a speaking role, what is it that they are doing for this performance, all right? And this is just sort of this flow chart, this next slide I'm showing you, is just sort of a breakdown of those phases that I was just explaining to you. So again, phase 1, baseline question. Phase 2, daily checklist. Phase 3 is the clinical evaluations, where we get into all of those vocal recording things that we were talking about, okay? So phase 2, there's the only part of this that we haven't covered. So after they do their baseline questioning, right, the study continues to follow up with the folks that finish their questionnaires, and it basically continues checking in with them over the course of a few months, giving them a questionnaire at the end of every performance, being like, hey, how are you feeling? Just check it in, right? Like, how's your vocal range doing, right? Like, anything changed stress level wise at work? It has them check off all of those things. And now is the important part of the podcast where I do point out that, as always, I am omitting a piece of information because that's what makes this podcast work. And we will get to it. There is some more specific stuff on these checklists, though. All right? So, there's all of our phases. And what we get to at the end of this...
So this was a long... What was the time frame on this study?
This study happens for more than 2 years, I believe.
Okay.
It started in 1997. I believe it definitely goes into 1998. I believe it also goes into 1999.
Oh, okay.
Which is actually one of the things that we're going to talk about. So what you're seeing here, this next chart, is the portion of how many of the study participants from each phase carried over to the next. This is what I'm saying when I say that, like, they really seemed to care about, like, the study attrition, where it is actually presented in graphs in this paper, which is not something I've seen before. Like, normally there's a footnote or something that was like, we had, 50 people in the initial trial and we dropped down to 25 over the course of the whole thing. Here, you can actually see broken down by show how many of the cast members actually followed up on the questionnaires and the phase 3 medical trials, basically.
By show.
By show. And I think it's very funny because it's like, you can see like, like high society, like they lost a whole bunch of people in phase 2. And by the time we got to phase 3, nobody was left in the trial, kind of a thing.
Is that because of like a dropout of participation, or did the show close?
There's multiple points to this, and this is one of the things that our scientists are kind of contending with, is that some of these shows do close over the course of the run that is mentioned. I don't know if High Society is one of them, but the paper does say some shows do close. It also says that there's cast turnover, right? So like somebody who was there in phase 1 and phase 2 maybe just got a new job by the time phase 3 came around.
Right.
That happens all the time. And so like keeping this sample size was actually tough for them. And I think that's part of the reason that they are so specific about tracking it. The alternative, less generous way of viewing this is, as I've put in a little footnote here, the alternative title for this chart could be the percentage of Broadway actors willing and able to continue filling out simple paperwork. Which I will say, this paper does kind of give that feel to it, right? Like there is definitely that level of it that I was just saying, where it's like they were tracking this because there was, turnover rate for various reasons. However, they do keep bringing it up.
Right. There's a level of petty that seems to be...
They go so far as to explain like little bribes that they gave the actors, right?
Oh
like
my God.
they make a note of being like at the first meeting, each of the actors was given like a pen and a business card with the company name on it so that they would hopefully remember who we are and get back in touch with us, basically. There's stuff like that in this paper, which I think is very
That almost says like when you're communicating this research, half of it is like, hey, if you ever want to do a study on Broadway actors, here's the stuff that we had to do to get them to play ball. Here's what you should probably consider doing.
Yeah, right. Moving on from here, we now take all of these forms that all of our actors have done, and we're paying particular attention to the part of the questionnaire that was asking what they do on the performance, right? So like, do they sing? Do they dance? Do they act? And our research study team now needs a way to objectively categorize and rate the physical exertion and the difficulty of each of the parts of these shows. And y'all, I did not know this existed. For years, I have had to listen to undergrads or stumble onto various forums where lunatics are debating the difficulty of different roles and like, is it harder to play Mrs. Lovett versus, well, listen.
We did science on it?
We don't need to do that. Science did it.
Nice.
And science took...
Oh, this makes me so happy because I too have had many, many, many of those arguments. And now that I know that I have a chart that I can actually refer to,
God.
it's so good.
So what they did is the scientists hired vocal coaches basically to calculate the physical demand exerted by each of the actors in each of their roles on each of these shows. And so you can see here, for, let's take Cats, for example. The vocal demand was rated from 15 to 57. The physical demand was rated from 0.73 to 3.56. I have no idea why they were on totally different scales. It was probably just because they had other random actors create these scales, basically. And they just, created a mean. So, the mean difficulty of singing in Cats is a 36.03, and the mean physical demand for dancing in Cats is a 2.34.
Oh my god! The Sound of Music is the easiest one.
Yeah.
Hey, no one can ever tell you that The Sound of Music is hard to perform it again. Science says definitively. That
Science says it's easy. Science says The Sound of Music is easy. Wow.
Right?
Whoa! Even Phantom of the Opera's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not that bad. In fact, so what they do here, you'll see, is that they highlight the two shows that were deemed the most difficult in terms of physical demand and vocal demand. So, Rent and Smokey Joe's was determined as having the highest vocal demand of the 17 shows that they evaluated, and Cats and Rent were determined to have the highest physical demand of the shows that they evaluated. All right?
What I'm still not understanding overall here is what this study is tracking over time other than their participation rate.
We're really focusing in on the physical wear and tear and the vocal wear and tear of our actors.
So it's basically like a long-term stress test. We're studying essentially the effects of performing in musical theater on the body.
Yes and no, because you are correct. We are studying the effects of theater on the body, but we are looking slightly more specifically than that. So I can show you now the 4 things that this paper was trying to determine. So this paper was trying to determine whether theatrical effects currently used in Broadway productions are associated with acute, irritative respiratory and related health effects among actors. We are trying to determine whether actors working in productions which utilize a combination of theatrical effects have different rates of adverse effects compared with actors in productions using a single effect. We are trying to determine whether measurable changes in vocal quality, upper airway appearance, and respiratory function occur after a performance in actors exposed to theatrical effects. And we are trying to develop a model that will allow us to evaluate the association between exposures. Okay?
Okay.
Let me break that down into layman's terms here. We're looking at fog, haze, and pyrotechnics.
Yeah.
This is and I now understand why the union mandated the attendance at the meeting. This is the equivalent of the NFL concussion tests.
In a lot of ways, it's a very, very similar type of test. And here's the weird thing. It's one that was done there have been multiple studies done on this. This paper actually references other studies also done into fog and haze. And this one was done in 1997, and I can tell you for certain, as someone in the industry, the results of this study are still a thing that is not understood or misquoted constantly. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to put a fog machine on stage or a haze machine on stage, and I get a musical theater actor tell me that that can't be there because it will damage their voice. Now, that gives away the gun. You would think that kind of gives it away a little bit, but
is that what this study actually found?
This is a science paper, and it's not quite so clear cut as that. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's talk about fog and haze machines for just a second, right? So this is a little diagram that they give us for a fog machine. And what I think is very clear to me as a technical director that is totally not apparent to anybody that doesn't work in theater is that when I talk about a fog machine or I talk about a hazer, I'm talking about 2 entirely different pieces of equipment, right? This is a fog machine. What a fog machine does, it heats up a water and glycol solution. It kind of vaporizes that, and that's what creates that fog that you're used to seeing, that gets blown out by a fan. This is like if you imagine like Dracula opening up the big doors and that fog rolling out across the floor.
Big thick stuff, and there's specific fog juice that you put into the fog machines.
Yes.
That does this.
I know the fog juice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know the smell of the fog juice.
Yeah, it's got a real distinct smell, doesn't
Almost like a sweet maple type deal.
That's because it shares a lot of the chemical makeup with antifreeze. Glycol is a type of antifreeze.
Yes.
Huh.
Used
That's
heavily
fascinating,
in
actually.
air conditioning systems.
Yep. The other way that you might see this effect done is with dry ice or with a CO2 machine. At a rave, if you think of that like big psh and like the big cannons that go off, that's CO2, for example. So we're not talking about CO2 today.
And they behave differently.
They behave totally differently. Both of them create a heavy fog, but CO2 is much more low-lying. It pools on the ground, whereas fog is middling and kind of dissipates.
Will hang in the air.
Yeah, it will hang in the air a little bit, whereas like a CO2 is going to like sit on the ground, basically. The other type of machine that we're talking about today is a hazer. The best way to describe this is that a hazer is what allows you to see light, which is a weird thing to say, but it lets you see beams of light. So if you're at a concert and you see like
that sort of tight pool of light, spotlight with the like column of light from the stage above.
Exactly. If you see that column of light, that's because a hazer is being used in the space. So a hazer often uses a glycol solution as well. Sometimes it uses mineral oil. So it's much more dispersed, but it is more room filling, right? So like a fog is a localized effect. A hazer is going to fill your whole space. That makes sense?
Interesting. Yeah, totally.
During phase 1, when we did that questionnaire with all of the actors, one of the things that they were asking them is, alongside like the physical requirements of the role, was, are you exposed to a fogger or a hazer while you were also in this role? And in addition to that, during phase 1, they actually went to all of the theaters and took a survey essentially where they found out whether or not glycol effects, oil effects, or if there were any pyrotechnic effects were used in that space. And then they went so far as, in the current show's setup, to go on stage and measure the exposure of glycol concentrations at different points on stage. So this graph that you're looking at now that I've just pulled up, on the left you see a bar graph. That's a location on stage for Les Mis during a specific scene. And you are seeing what the glycol exposure in that area, these abbreviations for folks that don't work in theater, are upstage left, upstage center, upstage right, downstage left, downstage center, and downstage right. So basically, where are you on the stage? What's the glycol reading in that area for the first 4 minutes after the haze or the fog is fired, and for the next 4 to 8 minutes after the fog is fired, basically.
Gotcha.
So I'm just now, it's just now occurring to me why they needed to list the difficulty of the shows, why all of this sort of background checking, why such a wide sample size, in order to isolate the information in a way that shows that it is the fogger or hazer that is causing the problem. They need to account for all of these other horrible things that can damage a human body encountered on a stage.
It is that, but it's also the fact that they need to figure out how much exertion the actors are doing in that area, because they need to figure out how much of this they're actually breathing in, right? One of the charts that I don't have here in here that is in the research paper is they sort of like set a standard where they're saying like, when you're doing this type of physical activity, this is how much air you're breathing versus when you're belting versus when you're just speaking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big difference.
And then they figure out where that person is located on the stage and check it against this graph and figure out how much they're being exposed to and of what type.
It is such an interesting problem to try to be standardizing this thing. I mean, at every level, there's so much they're trying to standardize that defies standardization.
This is one of the problems with theater, is that even when we use a standard piece of equipment, right? Like they have the model numbers of the fog machines that were used in these productions, right? Even when we're using a standard piece of equipment, we're using it in totally different ways, different times, amounts of fog, different heights. The sets are different. Not even just like, most Broadway theaters are these like 100-plus-year-old buildings that all have wildly varying types of like infrastructure and HVAC and things like that, right?
Ventilation, yeah.
Yeah. And that's all part of the survey. They even mention at one point that like during the survey they like test each of the spaces for like dust and mold to make sure that that's not going to contaminate their data.
Wow.
So when I say that this paper is 180 pages long, trust me, it's thorough.
They really went for it. That's wild.
They really went for it, and this...
It's incredible what you can do with funding,
Yeah, and this graphing that you're seeing here, like I said, we're specifically looking at Les Mis. This graphing exists across all the theaters. That's part of why it's 180 pages long.
Wow.
Oh, and I do want to talk about that idea that, like, you know, non-standardization, everything is totally different in theater. To give you a great example, James, of the things that they had to contend with, here's a paragraph from their look at specifically Cats. So I'm just going to read this real quick. In Cats, mineral oil is used in one scene to generate a more localized smoke effect rather than a uniform haze effect across the stage. The scene involves a giant flying tire which moves across the stage with oil being released from beneath the tire for a 1-minute period. During this time, actors are situated beneath the tire, above the tire, and at other onstage locations away from the tire. Figure 5 shows oil concentrations measured during this scene from various locations on stage. As it shows, oil concentrations vary widely across the stage during this 1-minute cue release period. So yeah, I mean, like, that's a great example. Like, I just love that they had to write this, first of all. That's part of why I grabbed this, because it's hilarious. But...
And we had to put technical equipment on the stage during a swinging tire scene from Cats.
Right, yeah, they're like, listen, we are doing our best to...
We're doing everything we can
show
here.
a standard of oil exposure to these actors, oil concentration exposure. But the problem is that it's coming from a flying tire, and depending on where you are on the stage, it's a wide variation of exposure, basically.
Yeah, totally.
Isn't this a little bit of like a research methods question? Like, there has to be an easier way to study the hypothesis.
Yes, but...
Yeah, what assumptions do you have to make?
One of the things that they reference is the fact that this type of study had been done before, and specifically in more controlled scenarios, they were looking at the effects of glycol. Give me 1 second because I'm trying to remember what it's actually called. P-glycol. Propylene glycol, excuse me. In a controlled study, they have looked at propylene glycol. And one of the problems that they had is that the manufacturers of these fog and smoke machines had made arguments in the past that, like, the FDA said that this was fine. And the problem is that the FDA, a lot of these studies were often looking at this, for example, in terms of, like, consumption. But inhalation is very different than consumption.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And there were even studies done on these things in an aerosolized form, but even that's kind of complicated because mostly it was done in sort of like industrial settings. And so it was looking at things like the maximum exposure levels, right? Because, like, you know, like anything, if you put too much of it in a space, it is an irritant to us, right? So, like, propylene glycol is irritating to humans in a high enough concentration. Also, some people are allergic to propylene glycol, right? Those are people that are allergic to hazers and fog machines that you've probably heard about. But what those studies didn't cover was long-term exposure to acceptable levels of propylene.
Yeah.
Right.
And this study was like looking at a couple of things, specifically like, does hazers and foggers and pyro cause asthma in performers? Does it damage their vocal cords?
What happens with unacceptable levels of propylene glycol?
Right. Well, so it's tricky, right? Because for the most part, nobody is in this study is being exposed to unacceptable levels of propylene glycol, right? Like, for that, we're very much talking about like an industrial setting, right? Like, a tank bursts and aerosolized propylene glycol is like in a confined space with workers. That's the kind of exposure that study was talking about.
Oh, interesting.
This is literally watered down propylene glycol that is being like dispersed into the air, right? So it's just a totally new type of study, or it's a totally new format for the study, basically. So like they kind of have to do their due diligence on this one.
There's also something to, like, once the FDA approves it for a particular use, you know, you're gonna have a hard time getting them to come back to it for this other weird edge case.
Right.
You can point to, oh, you know, we meet the standard. It's like, yeah, technically you do. But does that mean that it's not dangerous? It's actually something you need to still study. And the way that our system of regulations work, most of the time people don't.
Well, it's worth mentioning, right? Because, like, we're talking a lot about the constraints that they needed to do and, like, how they could make this consistent over the course of a year kind of a thing. It's worth noting, for example, that, like, stage managers, as part of Actors' Equity, were initially involved in the study, but they were eventually dropped from the study because their exposure to fog machines is too inconsistent. The thing that's great about an actor playing a specific role is they go and they stand in a specific point and a button is pressed and they are exposed to that fog over and over every night for years. Whereas like an actor or a stage manager is like in the booth and then they run down stage left and then they're like checking in with somebody and they got to go, you know, figure out what's going on in the audience. And so they run over there. Like their path is different every night. And so they weren't used in the study because it was determined that they weren't a usable source of information. Anyway, there's a whole bunch more data here, but we're going to jump ahead basically to the end of this thing. Their conclusions are that there is no evidence of serious health effects found to be associated with exposure to any of the theatrical effects evaluated in this study.
Great.
However, there's a big asterisk on that statement. What they did find was that peak exposure, so like the highest levels that they measured in terms of concentrations of glycol, were associated with reports of respiratory, throat, and nasal symptoms. So there was basically like inflammation. A lot of what we're about to talk about is statistically significant. They can't put like a full, you know, this is absolutely the cause on it, but like they're saying that like, yeah, high elevated levels of this stuff did seem to irritate people. There's another note in here that says elevated exposures to mineral oil haze are associated with increased reporting of throat symptoms, right? So like this is one of the problems is like from their study they can say, okay, it seems like the actors that were exposed to like had a whole fog machine dumped on them for 3 minutes and then sang a song. It seems like, yeah, they had some irritation after their performances, right?
Sure.
But
yeah.
Folks that were
as you'd expect.
Folks that were in mineral haze reported symptoms more. It doesn't say they measured them; it says they reported them more. And this goes on to be explained in a couple other things. Is that like there's no evidence of additive or multiplicative effects from having multiple types of effects in a single venue. And they do point out in their conclusions, they have a whole bullet point that just says other factors besides theatrical effects were also found to be associated with increased symptoms reportings. These factors included perceived levels of stress, both at work and at home, performance schedule, and the physical demand of the roles that they played, right? So, like, you know, when folks did a double-header day, when they did 2 performances on a Saturday kind of a thing, they would report...
that they felt rougher at the end.
Right? So...
Interesting.
There is a level of psychosomatic association here where folks are saying, like, I kind of feel run down. It must be because of this fog machine.
So at best, it feels like it was kind of inconclusive, right? Like they're not quite sure why folks feel worse.
I don't know that it's quite inconclusive. What I will say is this. They make a point of saying that it sort of like adds to the general body of study on these projects, basically. The sample size here is only 95 actors. It's also worth noting that like 95 Broadway actors are not a good case study for the general public.
Right.
These are the Olympic singers of breathing.
Right.
They are in peak physical condition, right?
Yeah.
What they can say is basically like exposure to these, you know, effects didn't have any serious health effects. So like I believe what they're saying is like doesn't seem to be connected to asthma, which was like the big report. Like right before this and like even now today, a ton of actors will tell you that like, oh, being near that machine will give me asthma. That isn't true. That is a rumor that just has persisted and will not die.
I would imagine if you already have asthma, it would be an irritant.
It could be an irritant. Yeah, exactly. Some people are allergic specifically to propylene glycol. That is a pretty common thing that comes up. That's why we put warnings whenever we're using like fog machines and hazers in spaces. And they, at the end of this, they do basically put out a paper in conjunction with Environ, who's sort of like a consultant that they have on this project, basically setting levels that shouldn't be exceeded for actors. And that's where I quibble a little bit. That's actually where I have a little bit of a problem with this, because what they present, I'll give you an example. Actors performing in musical productions should not exceed peak or ceiling concentrations of 40 milligrams per meter cubed for glycols and 25 milligrams per meter cubed for mineral oil. Time-weighted average exposures to the oil should be kept below 5 milligrams per meter cubed. Y'all, I am a technical director, and I don't know how to parse that information.
Yeah, because that's not even a number that the manufacturer of the fog machine is going to tell you.
You need specialized tools to measure that.
Yeah.
Right, which is literally what they suggest in this paper. Is they're basically like, go take a reading on stage and figure it out. And when your production is only a week long, you're certainly not going to do that. Right. It's you. I almost question whether or not like the Broadway houses have kept up with this. I hope that they have. Now, where it is useful is that these standards are sent to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers need to create their equipment in such a way that it can be held to these standards. And you damn well better be sure that Actors Equity is going to be on them on that basis. It is, right? So like that's...
It is also interesting, though, that the standard they set is a ceiling measurement when so much of the study is based on stage.
Ceiling concentration is like the peak of concentration.
Like I was thinking of
most
literal concentration at the ceiling.
No. Yeah, sorry. The most that they should be exposed
that
to, right?
makes way more sense.
And there is, I will say, like a slightly more helpful follow-up paper to this that gets put out that sort of like shows a little more visually, which is more helpful to me. For example, like where an actor should be standing, like how many feet from the device an actor should be standing, and how long it was on to create levels that were considered peak, kind of a thing.
I do gotta say, when you're talking with theater people, you really, really do have to be clear about metaphorical versus literal ceilings.
That's true. That checks out. But yeah, so that's the research. That's the paper that was done, basically. And really what it does come down to is, please take this information and go with you, that there have been studies on these things. You can look up the information. Next time someone tells you that, a fog machine is going to give them asthma, you can point to a study that says that's not true. And while it may cause irritation, it doesn't seem like it causes long-term damage. However, and you can put your own asterisk in here, studies ongoing, and please keep looking at this stuff because it's important.
Right. Also, if you're in Rent, make sure you just like rest your voice and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, and that is one thing I do want to leave you with, is that there is a really funny note in here where they were like, a surprising find was, they label it as a surprising find. Like they were surprised to discover that vocal warm-ups helped, basically.
Okay.
And lessened like irritation and things like that, which I thought was very funny, that like the scientists behind this like were basically like, vocal warm-ups are nonsense, but no, those are, hey, do your vocal warm-ups.
Actually, do your vocal warm-ups.
So how do we feel?
Well, interesting.
Definitely interesting. Yeah.
So before we even begin to talk about scales, I do need to acknowledge my own bias on this, of like my bachelor's degree is in theater. I have worked in theater pretty much my whole life. I've been around fog machines. Some of the irritations you've heard in Pat's voice throughout this presentation, I share. That being said, I think if we think on a ridiculous scale here, and I'm trying to put this in the context of our show and not my life, even still, I am very low on the ridiculous scale on this. I think
so.
The things I found sort of silly or ridiculous about this are entirely based on, like, I didn't know the lingo or equipment. Mm-hmm. But, like, it seems like pretty by the books science stuff.
I would agree. I think it's pretty by the books. I think that this is more of a novelty piece than it is a truly ridiculous piece. It's more funny that it is a study consisting entirely of Broadway actors.
Yeah. I think the funniest bit here is some actual doctors trying to do a medical study on a bunch of Broadway actors and having to deal with the chaos of both people who have no interest in doing paperwork and also have that tenuous level of employment where you get these people that you're trying to keep, like,
your sample size keeps changing.
Yeah. They might move home back to Chicago, to Ohio, halfway through your study.
Yeah, it's a notoriously volatile industry with a sort of stereotypically volatile population.
People. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a harder study than maybe you would have thought.
Yeah, like the most ridiculous thing in this to me is the ranking of how hard each show
It's
is.
pretty great.
That's great.
Which is pretty great because it's just like I can imagine the scientists starting that of like eventually having to come to that sort of really weird point-based scale system because they probably went to actors first and were like, "Hey, how hard is your show to work on?" And every one of them was like, "Mine is the hardest."
Yeah, of course. I'm the hardest working one here.
Like the pure, I can hear the fight at the union meeting.
Yep.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I would put this at I think a 1 on our ridiculous scale.
I think that's
Yeah.
correct.
I think that's right, yeah.
I think it is basically just science when it comes down to it.
Hey, that's the thing. There's a lot of science out there that's just science.
So how about that research?
They went pretty hard.
They are dealing with an immense number of variables, and I think they bogged themselves down in those variables. But as far as like if we're talking about, you know, overall impact, how sort of important to daily life or to you know, I think this is fairly important research.
Yeah. I want to know if I can stand. Can I inhale a fog machine?
Like
Is that
I
okay?
go, even if I didn't work in theaters, like I go to live shows all the time. I'm like in spaces where these fog machines and stuff exist. It is kind of important to know whether or not this is killing you.
This affects the general public. And Edie, let me open this up a little bit wider for both of you. Propylene glycol has been back in study recently, and you have definitely heard about it and maybe even read some of the papers on it because it is the main active ingredient that fueled all those studies around vape pens.
Yes. Yeah. It's used in vapes.
Interesting.
It's used in heat pipe. So like in any sort of large building where you have a heating system that is run based on forced hot water, it's generally infused into the water in a way to keep the water from freezing while it is like not actively part of the cycle.
Yeah, and so where this paper situates itself both as like, hey, here's like an effect that performers and attendees are routinely exposed to, and we're talking like everything from concerts to stage productions, right? So like this is at, you know, the recent Doja concert, and it's also at Les Mis, you know? It's kind of getting across the board, but it's also they're saying contributing basically to the body of work that is being done on this.
Yeah, it would not be totally unreasonable to tie this research in scale to something like the sort of secondhand smoke research that was done that showed the dangers of secondhand smoke. Like this is with the prevalence of vaping these days, it's pretty similar. It's situated in that realm of things.
And I say that because I think it's valuable and worthwhile and it's reasonable to bring up the vaping stuff. I do want to keep in mind that it is like it's 1997. Vapes aren't a thing yet. That is a much, much, much more recent study that's being done. And while I don't have any direct link that says like, you know, this vape paper referenced this paper, certainly the body of work is there on propylene glycol specifically.
I would say if I had to throw a number at it on our research scale, I would start at a 4 because I do think that there is large scale impact. I think it is important research. I would say I could be convinced to move that all the way up to a 5. The only reason I am not starting there is because I still don't feel like I quite know what a 5 looks like for us.
I agreed.
And like I am trying to avoid a scenario where a 5 has to be a Nobel Prize, right? Like this feels in the realm of important
A 5
work.
is not a Nobel Prize. Like 5 as we pitched it was like impact to our daily lives. And this allows me to bring our last slide that I skipped over a couple of times, which is a photo from my camera within the last month of me performing a haze test in a theater.
Yeah, this is definitely a 5 for you, Pat.
For you.
Here's what I'm saying. Like, I also have not defined what a 5 is. We have not defined what a 5 is, but if, like, the idea is impact to daily life, here is a picture, like, is it in my camera roll? Is a pretty good argument.
I would also say, like, this is the most straightforward, yup, they did a science, they answered an important question paper that we have had
That's
so
fair.
far.
And can I point out that part of the reason why I was able to do that is it was 180 pages.
True.
Like,
True.
It's so much.
it's like part of the reason why they're able to answer a question that matters is that it was a beast of a study.
There is a
Yeah.
wild amount of graphs in here. If you like graphs, I
Hey.
got the PDF for you.
I mean, look, for Pat, 100% this is a 5. For the rest of us, I think it's a 4. Because I think you're right. As a contribution, early contribution to like the research around vaping, I think I think it's extremely relevant. And I still think there's still a lot of work to be done there. And I don't know, vapes are as popular as they
Right. And I mean, this paper didn't really exist within the context of vaping. Vapes were not popularized at that point, or if they even existed in 97, 98. I mean, the fact that we can tie something from 1997 to 1998 to something that is very, very relevant, if not more relevant, in 2025 is I think, a point in its favor.
Yeah.
So what have you
Yeah.
settled on?
I don't know. I mean, look, if it's a 5 for one of us, then I guess let's throw a 5 on it, because that's gonna be rare. I'll tell you the truth. The stuff I like to
Yeah.
bring is never gonna be that relevant to our day-to-day life.
Hey, I here's what I'll say. I am happy to give this a 5. With the understanding that, like, in the future we may look back on this episode and say we were too hasty in our 5. In the
Oh, sure. Hey, we can retcon anything we want.
yeah, with the acceptance that hey, we're allowed to be wrong, boys. We are allowed to be wrong.
If nothing else, we're allowed to be wrong. Wonderful.
Science 1, research 5, and in the future we're allowed to be wrong. You can't stop
Yep.
us.